Good morning and welcome to the show. Today we're going to tackle the question, should you wait for weeks and months to get a response? That's a question from LinkedIn, and the backdrop to it is that you spend a lot of time putting effort into writing up your proposals, your presentations, sending out invoices, and then you wait for a very long time. So the question is, should you bother waiting for weeks or months to get a response? Now, for those of you who've been listening to the show for a while, you know that my answers are always qualified. So it depends. I'm not going to tell you a yes or a no because the answer to this depends on a number of factors. Number one, it depends on the sales cycle. Now, what's a sales cycle? A sales cycle is the length of time it takes from your first hello, good morning, however it is you approach your customer, all the way up until they pay the deposit or the full amounts to get the business done. Now, the sales cycle is different according to the kind of sales situation that you're in. So these two things are related. The sales cycle and also the kind of sales situation or the sales context that you're in. Because some industries, some services, some contexts, some situations have a short sales cycle, and then some have a longer sales cycle. So if you're in one of those situations where it's a short sales cycle, waiting for days or waiting for a week or two might not be a problem. But if it's something that has a long sales cycle, then waiting for 2, 3, 4 months, maybe even a year. Okay, maybe not a year, because I think a year is too much. So waiting a couple of months for responses or follow-ups or things like that would make sense. So remember, one of the first things that it depends on is the sales cycle, and the sales cycle is the length of time between your first interaction with the potential customer up until the time that they drop the deposit or the full payment. And then it also depends on the type of sales situation that you're in, whether it's a simple sales situation or a complex sales situation. If you've been listening to the podcast for the last 2 years, then of course you're already familiar with what a simple sales situation is and a complex sales situation is. Well, although I'm going to go over it briefly for those of us who are listening to the podcast for the very first time. Now, my suggestion, when you're done with this podcast, if this is your first time, use the search function in whatever podcast player that you're using. That's to search within this podcast right now. And you'll be able to find older episodes if you just use the key terms, simple sales situation, complex sales situation. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention that today is also one of those fuel queue days. So I'm on the fuel queue. I'm out and about. So if you hear any noises, it's from people haggling over who is supposed to be in line, who has cut in, things of that nature. And then I might have to start and stop to move the car from time to time. So that's where all the interruptions and the noises are going to be coming from. Although I've wound out the windows, so the car noises should be down to a minimum. Okay, now back to where we were. Okay, yes. So if this is your first time of listening to the show, when you're done with this, use the search function, search simple sales situation, complex sales, simple sales, complex sales. You get all the material that I've done over the last 3 years, getting close to, I should reconfirm, but I wouldn't be surprised. I know for sure we're over 580 episodes, that's for sure. So there's a lot to go over. I guess bottom line, what I'm trying to say is that there are lots of resources over here on the podcast for simple and complex sales that you can refer to. Okay, now what's a simple sales situation? What's a complex sales situation? Let's give some examples so that we're not talking too theoretical, so that the newbies understand exactly what it is that we are talking about. Now, a simple sales situation is different from a complex sales situation by a number of factors. Now, there might be a lot more. But since I'm riffing over here, I might forget everything. That's why I say go over to older episodes where I have given a much more in-depth treatment. So number one, the number of the parties that are involved. In a simple sales scenario, we usually have just two people. There's the buyer, there's the seller. That's it. And then for complex sales, you usually have the seller on one end, and you kind of have a committee of buyers on the other end. But basically, it's not just one person who's going to be saying the yes or the no to. The example that I like to give is buying egusi in the market. When you're there in the market and you're buying egusi, it's just two people. There's you, and there's the woman who has the egusi. You either buy it or you don't. Like yesterday, my mother-in-law is currently with us because we had some medical emergency, so she's helping out in the house. And then mother-in-law wants to go and buy some fish. We get to the market. Mother-in-law is based in Lagos. We live in Abuja. And then, of course, understandably, prices of things are different. And so we're at the fish section because my mother-in-law, my wife, they really love fish, as in they eat all kinds of fish. Those of you who have been listening to podcasts for a while, you know that I can't stand fish. I don't eat any kind of fish. But my mother-in-law and my wife, it's their thing. So shrimps, underwater snails, okporoko, dried fish, kwanla, but all kinds of things. Things that look fresh, things look like they're going rotten. I remember once when my mother-in-law took some catfish and she cracked it open, and I thought I saw something like a maggot, and I pointed it out to her, and she said, "Oh, okay, that's normal." And then she picked it up, and then she paid for it, and I was like, "What? Did she just buy fish that looks like it has maggots in it? Like dried fish?" But anyway, I found out from another family member of mine who also likes dried fish that is common and it's not a problem. That you boil the fish and you eat it, and it's not a problem. But anyway, that's for you fish guys too. Iron out amongst yourselves. So she's there and she's looking at all the fish and everything, and she picks one and she's like, "How much is this?" And the lady said 4,000 naira. And she's like, "What? 4,000 naira?" My mother-in-law admitted later on that she knew that kind of fish would be expensive anyway because it comes in from Norway or the Netherlands or some other place like that. So it's one of those expensive type of fishes. I'm sorry I don't know the name if you're a fish lover, but I'm sure you can figure it out if you want to try out the fish. So she admitted that she knew it would be expensive. She just didn't think it was going to be 4,000 naira for a pack of them. And eventually the seller, her patients got tested, and she was like, "Look, mommy, you're either going to buy or you're not going to buy. I've told you it's 4,000 naira." And then the woman just moved on. And of course, my mother-in-law didn't like that. But those are the kinds of liberties that you have when you're dealing with a simple sales situation. It's just you and the other person, and you can say take it or leave it, because it's not just that it's two parties, but you're usually dealing with low-priced commodities, and so there's no need for any fine, sophisticated selling. So the woman who had the fish, there's no need for her to be fine or sophisticated about selling in those circumstances. Now, for instance, I, on the other hand, am a business consultant, so I have to be a little bit much more sophisticated. So I'm sure you can tell that selling consultancy services or selling architecture services or selling wedding photography services is a little bit more complex than buying or selling egusi in the market. So I hope you guys are beginning to appreciate the difference. So I have to be sophisticated and consultative when I'm dealing with people. The woman in the market, she doesn't have to. "Look, madam, my fish is 4,000 naira. If you're not going to buy, please step aside. Let other people who are interested in this wonderful fish from Norway, let them come and buy." And, well, of course, my mother-in-law bought because it's their thing. So she not only bought that expensive fish, she also bought okporoko and bought dried fish and bought the tiny fish and then the crayfish and then this fish and then that fish. Anyway, bottom line is, you guys know I'm not going to eat from that soup. Anyway, so where was I? I think I wasted too much time on that. Okay, yes, so the number of parties involved. So simple sales scenario is just buyer and seller. Complex sales usually have a committee of people involved. The architect example that I just gave, you might be talking to your potential customer, Madam Ogedengbe, over the factory design, but Madam Ogedengbe most likely has a business partner that she has to speak to, and since architecture services are expensive and the buildings are going to be expensive and all that, she probably has to discuss with her spouse. Maybe her children are also partly financing the project. So you can see that even though as the architect it's just you and Madam Ogedengbe at the table now, it's reasonably expected that she's going to talk to her husband, her accountant, and then maybe her kids who are co-investors in the project. So in that case, there's you on one end, and then it looks like there's 5 or 6 people on the other end. So that's how number of parties plays into whether you have a simple or a complex sale. The nature of the product. Is the product simple? Is it commodity? Is it a service? How complex it is? Those sorts of questions. So buying and selling a car, that's relatively straightforward. I go there, I look at a couple of models, I either like it or I don't. I come back a couple of times. But bottom line, if I start looking at cars in January, you can expect that by February I've made up my mind. On the other end, if I run an airline, that's a different thing. Buying planes. The planes need to be financed. We need to know about the models. I need to talk to my engineering department. Sorry, not my engineering, my Is it technical and maintenance department, whether they know how to maintain Boeing 747s or whatever other aircraft is there. Let's see what else. Would also have to liaise with industry stakeholders like the FAAN. Yeah, that's the Federal Aviation Authority of Nigeria. Yeah, so you can see that buying a car is a lot more straightforward. Buying a plane, there are lots of people that we need to talk to, and that's because planes are infinitely much more complex, and so they need more regulation, more parties are involved, things like that. So that's how the nature of the commodity, the nature of the product or the service itself determines whether something is simple or complex. So we've got number of parties, we've got what else? Number of parties, the type, the nature of the product or the service itself. Is it simple or complex? There's one more that is important. There are several others. Okay, price. Usually you find that complex sales situations are usually much more pricey. So egusi, okay, fish in the market, straightforward. 4,000. Do you have it? Don't you? Buy or leave. But then buying a car, okay, that's a little bit much more expensive. We're now talking maybe 4 or 5 million at the time of recording in Nigeria, depending on which kind of brand of Toyota you want to buy. And of course, I'm not talking brand new. I'm talking second hand or previously owned or previously cared for, as some people like to say. I think they're just trying to whine somebody, just gassing people unnecessarily. Just call it like it is. It's second hand. Stop saying previously loved or previously cared for. Where was I? Okay. I've truly lost my train of thought on this one. Gosh, I really can't remember what it is that I was saying. I know it was tied into the. Oh yeah, price. Okay, yes. So, yeah. So the price of a Gucci very cheap. The price of a car, which is much more of a complex sales, much more expensive. So that's how price ties into the whole thing. So you find that the more complex a thing is, the more parties are involved you have to interact with. You find that the more expensive it is going to be. And in the relative sense, buying a car, cheap. Buying airplanes, expensive. Okay, buying a handbag, cheap. Buying a house, kind of expensive, and okay, well, very expensive. And you can see how it ties into the whole thing. So buying a handbag, simple sales scenario. Buying a house, complex sales scenario, in a relative sense. Then the final one is, you will notice that the more simple sales scenarios where we're dealing with cheap commodities, people don't care about the relationship. So the market woman told my mother-in-law that, look, mommy, I've told you, it's 4,000 naira. If you're going to buy, buy. If you're not going to buy, then just move on. Somebody else will buy. That's what happens in a complex sale. In a simple sale, people are not bothered about relationships. The complex sale, on the other hand, we have to be a little much more sophisticated. We have to use more finesse, and that's because these relationships are important. So back to the architect example. The architect can't just say, "Look, Madam Ogedengbe, I've told you what I've told you. Piss off. I'm leaving." The architect has to be much more polite, because even though he doesn't end up doing business with Madame Ogdengbe, he wants to have a good relationship with her because she might have some connects to one or two other people. And even though he doesn't get this job, he might be able to get another architecture gig through recommendations through her. And it's the same. The person who sells the car at some point can say, "Look, dude, you've come to my lot 3 times in the past 2 months. You come and you test drive 5 cars each time you come, but you haven't bought anything. Guy, I beg, I'm not doing business with you. Can you just, go someplace else? I'm tired. I'm done." But the person who sells medical equipment, for instance, or who sells airplanes to airlines, the person needs a little bit more finesse. You try and nurture the relationship and try and figure out if this is going to be a profitable relationship, because you might not supply the person's hospital with x-ray machines now, or you might not supply this airline with airplanes now, but hopefully you're trying to cultivate the kind of relationship where you're going to be able to they're going to be able to refer you to other people that you can end up doing profitable business with. So one moment, I have to move the car. Okay, now we've gotten close to 15 minutes, so I think I might as well wrap it up. So how does all this relate to how long you wait, whether you're waiting weeks or whether you're waiting months? If you are in a short sales cycle, and if you are in a simple sales context, then expect to wait for hours or maybe days, or in some cases maybe even minutes. So if you sell small chops, it might make sense that somebody called you at 9 a.m. and then you're calling them back at 11 a.m. to follow up how far, because it is just small chops. You're selling buns and chicken and stuff like that. So they call at 9, you give them the quote, it's 200 naira per plate. They say they're going to have 100 guests, and they say, let me think about it. You know, they're just trying to compare quotes, no problem. You ask if you can call them back. They say, okay, you collect the phone number. In that case, it would make sense. They called you at 9, you can call them at 11 or 12 to say, my guy, how far are we doing this or not? Summary. So that is a simple sales scenario with a short sales cycle. So expect to wait hours or minutes. That is normal. Now, if you are in a long sales cycle with a complex sales scenario, waiting for weeks and waiting for months is reasonable. If somebody is setting up a hospital and the person is looking at quotes to buy an x-ray machine, the person is not going to get back to you today. These things cost millions of naira, tens of millions of naira. People don't have cash to just throw around like that on such big decisions. The person is not just talking to you, the sales rep from Philips and Philips. The person is also talking to sales reps from what's the other company called? The American company, Edison, General Electric, what else? And all the other different companies, because the person wants to make a good decision. So in this case, waiting for weeks is not out of the question. So if you call the person up today, you guys have had a couple of meetings, it might not be out of place to wait 2 weeks before you call the person back to follow up, to say how far or whatever is the next step in your process, because this is a complex sales scenario. It's a long sales cycle. Nobody's making that decision today. So if you call today and you call again in 3 weeks, that's okay. That's normal. In this case, if you speak to the person at 9 and then you call them back at 12 and then you call them back at 3, by the time you try calling them back at 6, they would have blocked you. I guarantee you, because nobody has time for all that crap. They're trying to set up a hospital. It's expensive. You're becoming a pest. They will just block you. That's what the average Nigerian will do, because they're nice. They don't want to be rude. They don't want to tell you to F off. So those are the things that determine how long it is that you're going to wait, whether for weeks or for months or for minutes. So if you want to know what's realistic given the situation that you're in, then you have some soul searching to do, or rather some research to do. So try and figure out what kind of sales cycle are you in, what kind of sales situation or sales complex are you in. Is it simple? Is it complex? These are the questions I need to be asking. And this is where and why I recommend that we also speak to our older colleagues in the business, because they are the ones that will be able to tell you, like, hey, dude, as in, slow down. You want to make this money, but you're moving too fast. This is how things work in this industry. It's not sharp like that. For architecture, it's expensive, especially when you're dealing with high net worth individuals. This is how you do it. This is how you do it. So just relax. You don't call this woman on Monday and then you call her back on Tuesday. You come across as, desperate, as if you're hungry. And these people don't like dealing with boys that are hungry. So just relax. Yourself, have some respect. Form small. You call her on Monday, Abby. Relax. Give her 2 or 3 weeks and call her again and see how far. So that's why it's good to speak to people who are much more knowledgeable in the field. They're able to give you much more realistic expectations how to go about stuff. So long as you ask yourself all these questions, you're going to have a realistic sense of how quickly to expect responses from people after you send them the proposal, the presentation, the offer, the invoice, the whatever it is. Now, there's one more factor that I would have loved us to tackle, but we're already over 18 minutes now. And that's on whether you have a continuation or an advancement. But that one is going to take a lot of some more time to explain. So I think I'll just shelve that for tomorrow. So you can say that this is part A or part 1 of dealing with how long do I have to wait, whether for weeks or for months to get a response. So for tomorrow, we'll get into part 2. So thanks for your time and attention. It looks like the queue is moving, so I might as well wrap up this recording, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.